Help your canine stay active and healthy at any age with red light therapy. Red Recover pads are easy to use and 100% natural. Use promo code BIG-O for 10% off your first order.
And welcome to our regular Wednesday morning, 9 a.m. East Coast, or as Kurt Helin from NBCSports.com and Pro Basketball Talk calls it, 6 a.m. West Coast. Weekly look at the Miami Heat and around the NBA with our RedRecover.com Inside the Paint. I'm Ira Winderman from the South Florida Sun Sentinel, but by now I kind of hope you know that already. Kurt, it's really interesting. I didn't know where to start this week's show because on one hand, we've had the biggest Heat news of the offseason with Tyler Hero and his extension at a pretty sizable number that I want to get your thoughts on. On the other hand, what happened outside Vegas yesterday with Victor Wembanyama from the French Pro League and Scoot Henderson from the NBA G League Ignite tells us that this year's lottery is going to be like no other before. And as everyone who seemingly was out of that game yesterday said, tanking season has begun. So let me get your quick thoughts before we go back into this. We'll get to our chat board, so please hit us up on our YouTube chat board. Smash those like buttons everywhere across social media for the Big O Show. Quick thoughts. Your thought when you, number one, saw the Tyler Hero extension come down when Woj had it first on Sunday night. And two, the video clips, maybe you watched some of the game, of what you thought about our draft lottery 2023 preview last night.
Look, with Tyler Hero, my first thought was that was a bigger number than expected. It was a bigger number than like you and I had discussed. And it struck me as a real Heat bet on Tyler Hero because that's second, third star money. Or third star money, maybe. You're making a bet that he is going to be that guy. He's rating sixth man of the year. We've talked about the defense and everything else, but you're making a bet that 3 years from now, he is your second or third best player and can be that on a championship level team. It's not necessarily, I don't think it's a bad bet. And with the rising cap, I really don't think it's a bad bet. Look, Tyler Hero brings a skill set. So ultimately, even if you want to move on, that number is not going to be insane in a few years. So it was, again, more than expected, but reasonable. And then last night, look, I watched that game, Ira. I watched most of it up until the very end. Wow. This really, I don't like, I'm not a scout. I was texting with some people and I know there were, look, every team had representatives there. Because there's some other guys on the G League Ignite too, but this is where the NBA hates tanking, and they flatten the lottery odds. Ira, and you don't really deal with it directly in Miami, but you know how much the league and Adam Silver hate the discussion of tanking, hate the concept that teams try to lose. There's gonna be some serious tanking this year, even with the flattened lottery odds, because Wembanyama looked every bit the true unicorn, 7'4" guy who's literally handling the ball as the pick and roll ball handler and hitting step back threes, blocking shots inside. He's so long. Gobert does a little of this. He just changes the angles. You guys got to come in on and it messes him up. And Scoot Henderson looked amazing.
Yeah.
He's explosive. He is athletic. I know. I heard the Derrick Rose comparisons they were making on the broadcast. I hate doing those kind of things to young players because young Derrick Rose was otherworldly. That's just not a fair comparison. But he is an elite point guard athlete who is going to be a corner. I mean, those two guys alone are cornerstones, and this is a deeper draft than that. There are people who love the Thompson twins. There's a lot at the top of this draft, and I don't think it's a coincidence that when Danny Ainge decided to tear it down, he didn't say, let's wait a year, man. No, this is the year you want to be up there.
And that's the problem also, Kurt, and we'll get back to the Heat in a second. I want to talk about this more in our second segment here on the RedRecover.com Inside the Paint Show is when you have one of these lotteries, a Shaquille O'Neal lottery, a LeBron James lottery, a Tim Duncan lottery, a David Robinson lottery, you're willing to risk a lot. And what happens there is there are going to be 5, 6, 7 teams you play this year who have no interest in winning. And they might accidentally win because some of Popovich's young players, I mean, you talk about a team that has defined its existence by lottery luck. There would be no San Antonio Spurs if there was no lottery luck, if there was no Robinson and Tim Duncan. I would almost venture to say this. If the San Antonio Spurs didn't wind up with David Robinson or Tim Duncan, I'm not so sure there would be a team in San Antonio, because a losing team in a smaller market like that, and smaller television market, does the league little good. But when they're a successful team and they're drawing crowds, you can't do anything about it. So I think at least San Antonio, Utah, maybe Orlando again, because they're building more toward the future. We're seeing Indiana to a degree also. There are a bunch of teams that the last thing they want to do in any game this season is win. So in a how low you can go season, is 15 wins too much? In other words, it's crazy, Kurt. We haven't started the season. These teams play 82. You can do the math. If you only win 15, you're going to lose a lot of games. The equivalent of a 100-loss season in baseball times 3. I mean, how desperate will teams be to lose? Well, we see teams pull the Spurs, the Jazz, the Magic, some of the teams in the bottom of the Western Conference, pull their starter and leading scorer if they get too close to winning?
Well, in the case of the Jazz, they've got to trade a few guys, frankly. Like Mike Conley can still play a little bit. Like they've still got some guys on the roster who can, and they traded for guys, Laurie Market and stuff. Like they've got guys who can help. Houston's the other one, by the way, where they're just like, we've got a lot of really good young players. Trial by fire, guys. Go for it. We're gonna throw you out there. I think teams will tend to be 15, and part of it is the way the lottery has been shifted. The top 4 teams have the top 4. The worst 4 teams have the exact same odds now. And it's still only 14%, but it's like with these kind of guys, if you have the worst record, you can't be worse than 5th.
Right, but you have an 86% chance of not getting the first pick. You can look at it that way also. This year,
but if you've got 2, you've got 2 at the top. Suddenly, you're like, okay, but I take Scoot, and suddenly it's. I think you're going to. I don't know if 15 is going to be it, but I think you're going to have a whole bunch of teams hovering around 20, and we're not mentioning inevitably some. Look, and we've talked about this. Both conferences have the East, in particular, have 11, 12 good teams, like the teams that have playoff aspirations. Somebody is going to suffer an injury. And I don't want to jinx some team, but Team X that's good is good. And they're going to do what Portland did last year. Wow, we're without Lillard. Let's go.
Ooh, we're done.
Let's see what we could get, right?
And a perfect example of that might be Chicago with Lonzo Ball now out for a long time. It looks like that if DeMar DeRozan goes down or Zach LaVine goes down, all of a sudden it's like, well, what are we here for? I mean, if Zach LaVine goes down and Lonzo Ball's not ready, and you have 33-year-old DeMar DeRozan as your leading man, you probably trade him by the trading deadline and just go in that direction. So anyway, I don't want to get too far off track here. The one thing I will say is this, and I'm going to put you on the spot again, the kind of thing I hate when I do radio, where I ask for a comparison of which we've had no prep time at all. So I'll let you figure this out in your head. When I watched Victor Wembanyama last night, I thought Tim Duncan. I thought the featheriness that he moved like a big man, and that mid-range jump shot, Tim Duncan did it with the bank shot. It just reminded me of him. And you talk about a generational player. Tim Duncan was that. So I know other people are saying Giannis, so I'm going to keep stealing your thunder here, Kurt, and put you on the spot. Who conjured when you watched him and that silky smooth 7'3" player? Were there anyone specific you looked at him and you said, I know this isn't fair, okay, but he sort of reminds me of player X?
Yeah, Duncan a little bit, because like you said, he moved really well and he saw the game so well. But I'm trying to think, because part of it is that there really isn't a good comp. Giannis might be the closest just because of the ball handling, of the fact that a couple of times he brought the ball up. Apparently he did this a lot in practice. I didn't go to Anderson to watch these games, but he's bringing the ball up in practice and doing stuff. But Giannis doesn't have that. Giannis is downhill, right? Like Giannis, he comes around that pick and he's a freight train, and he is just so strong and so athletic. And
You know what? I'm going to give you.
Got the shot. I don't know. I'm not even sure. I'm not sure who that is.
I'm going to give you one more who people thought this would be and came up short, but from body frame style, from perimeter style, Kristaps Porzingis. I mean, remember him in New York, and he was the unicorn, and he was the be-all, end-all. He was the 7'1", 7'2" type of perimeter player. Lean could do it that way. I think this is what people thought Kristaps Porzingis could be. And for whatever reason, culturally, the style of game, the physicality, not wanting to mix it up, the injuries, being stuck with the Knicks. But I think that's a comp also. And it's weird because it's almost demeaning to call someone a better Kristaps Porzingis, as if Kristaps has had a failed career already when he's still young and maybe in this third chance with the Washington Wizards he comes around. But I think that's another comp. Anyway, I got off track because that's what we do here on redrecover.com Inside the Paint, which is why we have 3 segments, and you can listen to the podcast in any order you damn well please. So I want to go back real quick here to the top story about the Heat this week, and I'm sure we will bleed over into our second segment. I am catching everyone here on the YouTube chat. I will get to those during it. I will again try to spring questions for Kurt that he is totally unprepared for, as we do here every week. Because it's 6 in the morning, I figure, you know what? If we're going to put anyone on the spot, put the West Coast guy on the spot. The Tyler Hero extension, 4 years, 120 guaranteed, $10 million in unlikely incentives, $130 million. Whew. When I saw that, you and I were talking about Jalen Brunson money. We were talking about $106 million. We were talking about something less than, I mean, he got more than Jaylen Brown money. So Kurt Helin, a couple of questions. Yeah. Is it simply a matter of the NBA economy where you look back at guys like Jabbar and even Shaq and they say they never got this kind of Michael Jordan, they never got this kind of money, when the money's just exploding, when the NBA has an inflation like no other part of our economy? So do you just accept it and move on? Or like you mentioned here in our open, was it a little bit jaw-dropping to people outside of the Miami Heat circle?
A little bit jaw-dropping. Part of it is the inflation, and I think Brian Windhorst talked about this recently. I know I've heard it from people, and you've probably heard it, Ira. If you talk to executives now, more and more, because the numbers are just mind-boggling, they actually talk about percentage of the cap. Hey, this guy's a good value at 8% of the cap. Like, they are using those numbers because a $30 million player is kind of is a big number. And it makes you think, wow, that guy's got to be, like you said, that's got to be a Jordan Shaq number, but not in today's NBA. Look, Larry Nance got 11 million basically, this other year, and you're like, hey, that's a good number for a backup big. And that's a fair number for a guy you like. The numbers are just kind of stunning that way, where if you just say, oh, he's like 7% of the cap, then you're like, oh, okay. I think though, by the way, in Hero's case, it was a little surprising. I think it was just, like you said, I think a lot of people use the RJ Barrett comp, which we had talked about as well, a little, as whether that was fair or not. But those, he beat all those numbers. Miami has paid him more than that. And like I said, I think you're betting on him and you're rewarding him and you're saying, hey, we're paying you, now go live up to this contract.
But let's look at the hierarchy of the Heat. Where would you rate Tyler Hero among best players on the Heat, sort of 1 through 4?
Today?
I think there's 4 guys that stand. So give me your Heat hierarchy at the moment, Kurt Helin.
Jimmy, Bam. Oh, Bam looked great. I have questions for you out of last night, by the way, but Bam looked great.
Put me on the spot. Nice turn of events.
Jimmy, Bam, 1, 2, in whatever order you wish to put them. Tyler's got to be 3 now, and that puts Kyle Lowry 4th, but Kyle can change that, can't he? Like, I think it's on Kyle now to be the 3rd best player. He's going to have the ball in his hands. Right. He's certainly going to have the opportunity.
And actually, Kurt, just to interject here, the way we're using the phrase best player, but you know what? I'm going to turn this question in another direction now. List me in order the Heat's 4 most important players.
Ooh. I'm saying Bam first just because of the versatility of the defense. Jimmy second. They've still got to be 1, 2. Most important. I feel like I'm going to – Lowry might be more important.
Yes, that's where I was going with this.
Yeah, I mean, to me, he's more important in terms of if you're going to win big this year, if you're going to be in the Eastern Conference Finals or the finals and be back at that, top 4 level, Kyle Lowry's the like. I think we know what we're going to get from Bam. If Jimmy can walk, you know what you're going to get from Jimmy. Tyler Hero is improving, and I thought looked pretty good last night. The bits I saw.
I think game. Him and Bam look very good. We'll get to that in our second segment. We'll break down the preseason opener.
But Lowry's the guy who didn't give you much last year, and we could certainly get into some of the bench guys, and then right now it's Caleb Martin would be really high on that list too, just because he's the de facto 4 as we speak, and so he's going to have to be that guy. But Hero, I think he might be one of their best players, but you know what you're getting. He starting coming off the bench, you kind of. There's a certain expectation of the 20 points a night and this floor spacing and the athleticism. He's got to be better. Like I said, I think he's one of their best players, but in terms of importance for a long run, it's Lowry and Martin even maybe are ahead of him just because those are the guys who are critical.
And that's why I put it, because I think this was a protect your future move. And I wanted to sort of run this by you also and Big O's been a big fan of this for years. He's spoken to us about, hey, you want a bridge to the future, and you have that with Bam Adebayo and Tyler Hero. There are some teams who are screw the future. We're living in the moment, and the Heat at times have very much been that with the way they've dealt first-round picks. An example I could see is your Los Angeles Lakers, living in the moment, have a bunch of old guys.
Have to maybe, but they had a guy like Alex Caruso, who could have been somewhat of a bridge to the future, and the way they treated him in free agency a year ago, when he left to Chicago, it was like, okay, good riddance. We got old guys. We got Russ. We got Anthony Davis. We got LeBron. Yeah. And hell, last year they had Trevor Ariza and Avery Bradley and even more old guys on the roster. Dwight Howard. They just had their old guys, and they were playing that way over the years, the recent old guys. Is it a dangerous game to try to balance both, though? When you have a set salary cap and you're trying to win now, you see, to me, Tyler Hero's extension works on this level. And I think people lose sight of this. The new money doesn't start this year. He's still making a more than a reasonable $5.7 million this year, final year of his rookie deal, first-round pick 2019. So the first big money of 4 in Tyler Hero's deal comes as the last big money year in Kyle Lowry's 3-year deal. So you have that 1 year next year where you have this absurd salary cap where you can have Bam and Jimmy and Kyle and Tyler and Duncan Robinson, all with these $18, $19 million plus, all the way into the 40 millions. But then Kyle moves aside, you would think, and Tyler moves up there, like we talk about in the hierarchy, is number 3 anyway. But if you're trying to be good now, and you're trying to be good in the future, and therefore you're watching your luxury tax now, so you're not a repeater team in the future, and you're watching your hard cap now because you may want to make a trade for the future, I'm just wondering, if you try to do both, and even the Golden State Warriors last year, when they could have brought Wiseman back, when they could have played Kuminga, and they could have played their young guys, we saw clearly, Kurt, there was a time when he said, screw that. We got Steph, we got Clay, we got Draymond, we got old Andre Iguodala, we got older guys who can play. Even Wiggins is more of a veteran now than a young guy after his time in Minnesota and there. Is it a dangerous game to try to be both? It's almost like, what's the saying? When you're a master, when you're good at everything, you're a master of nothing. So I'm just wondering, are the Heat trying to play 2 final lines, selling us in the future, and also telling us they always compete because we're the Heat and we don't play lottery games? But you wind up then sort of stuck in the middle. I think it depends on the players you've got. I think to use your Warriors example, this is the year we're going to find out. Look, Otto Porter's gone. Gary Payton II is gone. And they are leaning hard this year on Kuminga. They are leaning hard this year on Wiseman a little bit. Moses Moody is Jordan Poole. I think Jordan Poole proved himself in last year's playoffs. He is part of that. But they're leaning hard into that these guys are a bridge. And they're counting on Kuminga, frankly, and Poole to be a Tyler Hero level player. By the way, you know who might have been happiest with the Tyler Hero extension? Jordan Poole's agent.
Poole, right? And I want to get to that equivalencies also. I got to say this. For the upcoming break, both Kurt and I, we're going to take care of this red light technology from redrecover.com because we have so much to get to today. I want to talk about the Heat's exhibition opener last night against the Timberwolves. I want to get more into the implications of the Tyler Hero deal. I want to talk, like Kurt said, about what Bam Adebayo did with his 17-shot aggression he had. I'm going to post a story pretty soon after this show is over at sunsentinel.com on the Heat's big lineup with Yurtseven and Adebayo and whether that is doable. We have so much to get to. And I know Kurt wants to get to a commercial real quick. So we will be back right after this on redrecover.com Inside the Paint. And I promise you, the next two segments will be better than this first segment. I'm Ira Winderman from the South Florida Sun-Sentinel. Out on the West Coast, that's Kurt Helin from NBCSports.com, Pro Basketball Talk. And we have so much to unload and unwrap with the Heat's preseason finally starting. I don't know how we're going to get this all done in an hour when the regular season starts, but I don't want to ignore the chat board. So I'm going to go over there, Kurt, real quick, just to see some of the stuff we have coming in. Again, smash those like buttons out there. Join us on our YouTube chat board. We start with Greater Good, who says, happy with the Tyler Hero contract. He belongs with the Heat. And Kurt, there's certainly something to be said for continuity with keeping your own and developing your own.
Oh, absolutely. I think at the end of the day, like the best teams do that, right? Like the best organizations build in-house and develop in-house. Like it's not just that you draft, you get lucky and you draft at the top, and it's really easy occasionally when we drafted Ja Morant. Look how good he is. But that really wasn't development. The best teams are the teams that have, and the teams that sustain this are the teams that are able to find. Tyler wasn't that deep. Bam wasn't that deep in the draft, but find guys farther down the draft that you can turn into elite players. That's not easy to do.
I agree. Want to get some quick hits on these. Tony tells us, good morning, guys. Now that PJ Tucker is gone, how do his minutes get distributed since Miami has no true power forward? And how many minutes does Duncan get since he needs to get showcased for a trade? I think we saw last night they went with Bam and Yurtseven for a while. Caleb Martin still started because Jimmy sat out the game. Kurt, real quick, can a contender afford to showcase a player for a trade? And especially in this season's Eastern Conference, where I could probably give you 5 leading contenders in the Bucks and the Celtics and the Sixers and the Nets and the Heat, meaning one opens on the road in the playoffs. Is there really such a thing as showcasing when you're a contender?
A little bit, yeah. I still think, you've got to be a little more careful because you can't afford to rack up losses. I don't think Duncan's going to shoot like he did in this first game. Hopefully every game, that'll come back around. But I look, if you're going to trade somebody and you're going to say he has value in this trade, and you're not playing him, it's a little bit of a red flag. You have to put him out there. And I think you'll see a little more Duncan. Guy's still got a valuable skill. I still think he's not somebody who's just, you're dumping the salary. Like he's not killing you when he's out there. So
I'll get back to that about the tradability for Duncan. One of the questions I had was, this is from Greater Good. Could Max Strus be a possibility of power forward? Kurt, I would say this: when the Heat play positionless, anyone could be a possibility of power forward, right?
Exactly. I think they went with Caleb, but I think Max is going to get plenty of time too. And again, he's going to shoot better than he did last night. I think that was all right.
And we have some other stuff here on Duncan Robinson and Max Strus we'll get to. The Tyler Hero extension, the amount of money he got, and what we expect from him. I always look at this kind of stuff in 2 ways. Can a player be a starter? Can a player be an all-star? Can a player be all-NBA? Can a player be a component on a championship team? Tyler can be a starter because anyone can start. That's a coach's decision. That's not necessarily an ability thing. Do you see Tyler's skill set as being an NBA starter, or do you see him more because of the defensive shortcomings as of now as more of a Jamal Crawford, Lou Williams type? In other words, do you think that he might be career 6th man, but career great 6th man?
The defense is really, I think you nailed it. Like the defense is the key. I think he's a starter. I think he at least is that way for a while. But his defense has to be better. If he wants to start games, and frankly, if he wants, we saw this last year in the playoffs, he wants big minutes in big games, and to really be trusted, he's got to help them get stops. I thought was it just me, Ira? Didn't his defensive effort look better last night? Now it's one preseason game.
It looked better, but when you don't have when you don't have Jordan Clarkson, when you don't have Rudy Gobert, when you don't have Karl Anthony Towns, you don't look better defensively against a team without its 3 top players. Well, I guess I'm selling Anthony Edwards short, so he's probably maybe even their best player now. But 3 of their 4 best players, I think it says something also. Tyler Hero as an all-star. He was mentioned last year. He's second leading scorer. He's certainly dynamic. Obviously, not only to get 12, 15 players in the all-star game, you get injuries. It's almost like the Pro Bowl. So many guys are called all-stars more than those initially selected. Do you see him on an all-star track?
Yeah, I do. I think,
Really?
I mean, like you said, it's top 24 in theory because there's 12 on each side. But then, frankly, with injuries, it's more like top 30.
Right.
Yeah, he's that guy. He's going to have to work to sustain that. I mean, that's some pretty lofty company. But I think, personally, I think he's on that track. I think he is capable. I think he is, right now, more fringe all-star than oh, hey, he's in. Right. Bam is, hey, he's in. Like, I don't know that Tyler's there yet.
See, my question about this is Bam has 4 more years in his contract. Jimmy has 4 more years left in his contract. They're the leading man. They're probably going to get more of the all-star notice. So unless the Heat have one of these dynamic starts to a season where you say, hey, like with the Warriors, hey, they're a 3 all-star team, or like the Celtics have been at times, I'm just not so sure that he can get a third all-star. So then we're really saying, and Kurt, do you think that Tyler Hero is going to outplay Jimmy Butler and Bam Adebayo for the first half of his season? And I'm not so necessarily sure that you want that. When it comes to all NBA, I don't think so. And I'll tell you why. I was even watching the game last night. Anthony Edwards is very good on the way to great, better player than an actor, but you can go watch the Adam Sandler movie and decide that on your own.
He's all right.
And the movie was kind of campy. It was a perfect movie. You sit and say, I'll watch this on TV. I ain't spending $30 for me and my wife to go to the movies to see it. So I'll leave it at that. But when I watched Anthony Edwards, I said, he's in a completely different class than Tyler Hero. He just is. He's just that much of a better player. So I think all NBA is out. But I will say this, and Tyler had a really good point. I love the way Tyler talks about his resume, not in the first person, but in the third person and as a team, when he said this to me. I've been in the league 3 years. We made the NBA Finals once. We were 1 game from making the NBA Finals a second time. So he has shown that he can contribute to victory. He has shown that at the minimum, he is a team player who understands what it takes. I thought that was a really good approach by him, that when he listed his resume, he didn't talk first about being defending 6th man of the year, about being the second leading scorer on his team in his 3rd season, but he spoke about, look at the success we've had with me here. And I thought that was a really, really mature approach that he took to that.
That is interesting. And I think as a fan and as a team, you want that. By the way, he has contributed. He has had some monster playoff games. Yeah. He is capable of helping you out on those days. And the funny thing is, like, when we're talking about defensive shortcomings and concerns, we're almost talking second round of the playoffs and beyond with him, right? Like, those are the games where it gets really tight and you're going up against Boston,
Milwaukee,
Philadelphia,
uber elite players, crafty veterans, like
and teams that, and more importantly, when you get to the Final 8 and especially the Final 4, it's teams without weaknesses, right? Like, it's not oh, dude, we can just target this guy for an hour, like, that's what you need. And if Hero wants to play in those minutes, he can't be a target, right? But I think he's on that road. But I think he still contributes so much to getting there.
Right. And I see in our chat board here, Carlos points out that Tyler's playoff performances have left much to be desired. Look, he was not good against Milwaukee, the Bucks, his hometown team at the 21 playoffs. Last year he was hurt. And we have to be realistic about that. He had the hamstring injury. He was limited to the second half of the playoffs. And down here on one of our radio shows, he had a really good point also on a podcast when he said he found out at the start of the playoffs that his wife, his girlfriend, was expecting his second child. And he said that sort of threw him off. It's like he realized he was going to be daddy squared. And he said mentally he was off his game a little. So again, you're talking a young player, 22 years old, still finding his way. The second element to the Tyler Hero extension was the one that got me and had me thinking more, because I always think big picture. I'm thinking salary cap. I'm thinking tradability. Kurt and I have spoken about this for the last month or so here on RaidRecover.com, Inside the Paint. Once you extend a player like Tyler Hero, going from a $5.7 million contract to a contract that averages in excess of $30 million, he becomes a poison pill player. And basically what that means is over the course of the season, until the next offseason, he's untradeable for this reason. You can send him out at $5.7 million in matching salaries, but the other team has to take him in at $30 million, the average of his current year and his 4-year extension. No one has that kind of wiggle room outside of maybe they could finagle it to San Antonio Spurs or the Oklahoma City Thunder. So if you want to make that differential go away of $25 million, as the 25% you can be off on a trade a little bit, it would have to be a monster trade. It would have to include a Butler or an Adebayo or a Lowry, and that's not happening. So what it did is it took the heat out of the trade market this season. Kurt Helin, knowing what Duncan Robinson has left on his contract, 4 years, close to $80 million, the fact that he's not even a rotation player right now, can Duncan Robinson be moved without a sweetener? In other words, without a Tyler Hero tagging along? Can he be moved just with draft picks? Or essentially, by parking Tyler Hero with this extension, untradeable for this year, have the Heat also parked Duncan Robinson?
I don't think they've parked Duncan Robinson, but it's a little tougher to move him. He is going to take something. If you're going to get a Crowder-esque player, and I don't want to get into the details of Jay Crowder again, but if you're going to get somebody like that to come in and play the 4 who is a veteran who can help you, then you have, I don't know, I think to me you're going to have to include other sweeteners, and that's going to be picks or multiple picks depending on how you protect them and what they are, blah, 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 plus other players. And that can't be Tyler now. It's got to be somebody else on that roster that Team X covets. Right. That you've got to provide value. And that's why, you've got to showcase Duncan Robinson a little bit. You've got to put him in the rotation and get him out there and say, hey, again, we've talked about it. He still brings an incredibly valuable NBA skill to the table. He can still shoot the rock and maybe put in the right situation, on the right team. He has value, but you're going to have to send them another player and or picks that bump up that value, because right now he's more contract than player.
So if he's your last intermediate salary that you could package with a player, that in theory, even with Duncan at $18 million, you throw him in with a Gabe Vincent or a Strus or a Yurtseven, you get a $20 million package. You're allowed 25% of leeway in a salary capped out teams trade. That brings you up to $25 million. You can trade for a $25 million player. If you were the Miami Heat, and knowing the Jay Crowder situation in Phoenix, and knowing the Heat don't have a true power forward, would you give up some of your draft collateral to rent a player like Jay Crowder on the final year of a contract? And Kurt, the reason I ask you this is you're out in LA, you cover the Los Angeles Lakers, you're at their game at crypto.com, staples.com, whatever you want to call arena that is being called today. The Lakers have been adamant, we are only going to trade our future draft assets for the ultimate trade, or else we're going to wait. If you're the Miami Heat, would you send Duncan Robinson and 1 first-round pick out to the Suns to get Jay Crowder on a 1-year rental? Or do you feel that just depletes your first-rounders? You still owe 1 to the Oklahoma City Thunder. If you trade out a first-round pick with Duncan Robinson, you would basically have only 1 first-rounder to trade over the next 7 years. Would you do that for a short-term rental?
Yes, I would personally. I think the Lakers are an awkward comparison because they control, only because of the Westbrook trade and still the Davis trade, they control 2 of their own picks for the rest of the decade. We're talking 27 and 29, which is, by the way, why those are valuable, because everybody's looking at the Lakers down the line without LeBron and thinking, those could be really good picks.
Yes.
So I think Miami's a little different in that, nobody thinks even in who knows where the world will be in 2029, but the Miami Heat will be solid. It's just nobody's.
That's who they are, and that's how they play.
Right.
They don't lottery. We spoke at the top of our show. About the top.
But I would personally, because you're so close, and there's just going to be a bit of an arms race in the East. It's just going to be tough. I would be willing to do that to get we're using Crowder as an example. There will be other guys who probably come up and fit this role, but somebody who steps in, fills a need, and can be trusted in big moments, who can step in. And this isn't just an 82-game player. He's a 16-game player, to use the Draymond line, like a guy you can count on in the postseason. I would absolutely do that for a Crowder-like player. because I think that that's the going price now. You're going to have to give up something like that.
And as usual, we will get to Bam and Omer and big lineups in our final segment. Real quick here to fill people in. I spoke to someone in the Heat, and he made a very good point to me. I said, why would you take Tyler off the trade market? Why would you shut down your trade possibilities? And he said, here's the deal. If they would have waited on Tyler Hero till next summer, once he was re-signed then as a restricted free agent, he would have become what the NBA calls base year compensation. His salary would have gone up so much, he would have been untradeable until January 15th, 2024. So he basically told me, look, there's going to be a 7-month period. If we did that, we couldn't trade him next offseason. Just like there's a 6-month period now, you can't trade him during this season. It happens anyway. He then pointed out something else to me. If Tyler Hero didn't sign the extension and became a restricted free agent, he could have signed an offer sheet next summer for 1 year to then move to unrestricted free agency. Would have been about $7 million or so. If a player signs an offer sheet, we saw this with what happened with DeAndre Ayton, you can't be traded for a calendar year without your permission. So there would have been a full year when they couldn't have traded Tyler. So the Heat's view was this. There was always going to be a period when Tyler was going to become untradeable, either now or in the future. So that factored into their decision anyway, that they would have to look at one of those windows. So that's why the Tyler thing to me has so many different levels. It's not just about the salary or where he fits in or whether he starts or now that he can't become untradeable. There were so many arcane rules in there that no matter when you did this, we still would have the same questions. What we had going into last night's exhibition game with the Heat was questions about whether a big lineup would work in the NBA, because we thought the Timberwolves were rolling in with Rudy Gobert, Karl Anthony Towns, and then neither played. And yet the Heat still went big, and Bam Adebayo still went off. And we saw the Heat at least experiment with big. So after this break, on our final segment of our RedRecover.com Inside the Paint, I want to talk about Bam Adebayo as a leading man. I want to talk about big lineups and whether there's still a place for that in the NBA. And I know Kurt has some takeaways from watching the Heat's exhibition opener last night. We will get to all of that and hopefully a few more of your chat board questions as well after this break on RedRecover.com Inside the Paint. I'm Ira Winderman, South Florida Sun Sentinel. 9 a.m. in the morning. We start here Wednesdays on our RedRecover.com Inside the Paint show. He's Kurt Helin from NBCSports.com, pro basketball talk out in LA. Gets up at 6 in the morning every Wednesday for your Miami Heat entertainment pleasure. I'm looking at the chat board real quick. I'm not avoiding greater good, any Kyle Lowry conditioning questions. It's too early for that. Kyle Lowry, like every veteran his age, is going to ease into the preseason. Don't overstate or understate his minutes and what he did yesterday. For Kyle Lowry, it's all targeting October 19th, season opener against the Chicago Bulls. What I do want to get to from the exhibition opener, I'm going to be filing a story soon at sunsentinel.com about this, Kurt. A big lineup in today's NBA. With Jimmy Butler given last night off, the Heat shifted Caleb Robinson down to the small forward, opened with Omar Yurtseven and Bam Adebayo. This spacing was awful. And defense, Omar Yurtseven still has a bunch to learn. Is there a place, Kurt Helin, in today's NBA to go big like that if your players aren't necessarily up to the Rudy Gobert and Karl Anthony Towns pedigree?
I would say before I even get to that, that was really my question for you out of that game was what that looked like in person and how the Yurtseven Adebayo combo worked. I think big and small is getting confused a little bit with just skill. I think it'll kind of work in Minnesota because Karl Anthony Towns can step out. Karl Anthony Towns can face you up.
And prefers to step out.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that's, technically Giannis is a big. I mean, it depends on who your big is and what they do. You can't play two traditional bigs, I don't think, next to each other in today's NBA because of the spacing issues. But if one of your bigs can step out and is somewhat of a threat from three, or at least you've got to go out and deal with them 15, 20 feet from the rim, then it can work.
And yet last night when I looked at the spacing, you can see it's something that has to be learned. It's a different approach. Yeah. I still have issues with 7-footers spotting up in the corners. I know a guy like Myers Leonard and Kelly Olynyk made it work for the Heat, but they were career outside shooters who happened to just grow to really tall heights. But that's who they were and what they were. Defensively, though, Kurt, here's my issue. The Miami Heat have a very unique and largely successful approach on defense with their switch everything, which, out there in LA, you hear about when Bam's campaigning for Defensive Player of the Year and getting angry at Marcus Smart and Rudy Gobert, that he can guard 1 through 5. And invariably, the opposition will start a game, go to a 1-5 pick and roll, and there is Bam Adebayo out at center court on Trae Young, and it works because Bam's so unique. So the Heat have that style. They switch everything. We could see Kyle Lowry defending in the post. It's just who they are, and it works because they're active and aggressive, and they meet the challenges. Then we see teams that play drop defense. Utah Jazz, and they've been victimized by this in the playoffs also. When they had Rudy Gobert, we're always in a drop because a drop defense means you have a goaltender. You have a big man guarding the paint. The Heat played that way when they had Hassan Whiteside. Here's the problem, Kurt. Teams need to have identities. You are an X and you are Y. You play a 5-out offense. You are 3-point centric like the Warriors. You play a drop defense like the Jazz did or teams do with big men. I'm not sure you can easily toggle between the two in the same game. So if you're going to play an Omar Yurtseven, in Omar's minutes, and he said this to a man in the locker room, we finally got back in after a 2-year break without being in the locker room,
Yes.
And they said, we play a drop. We play a different defense. We zoned it a little more when Big Yurt is in there because you want your 7-1 goaltender to be back there by the basket. When Bam is in there, boom, we're the way we were last year when we went within one game of the NBA Finals. Kurt, can you think of, and again, I'm putting you on the spot like I did in our first 2 segments of redrecover.com Inside the Paint, of teams that have dichotomies, whether it's in their offense or their defense, where they're 2 different teams during a game. Where on offense, they might be 5 out, and then they put someone in, and they're getting the ball into the post, or on defense, where they're in drop coverage, and then they're in switch everything. I know some teams will go to zone, but that's a little different because you can ease into that. Is it asking too much, Kurt, to try to be the best of 2 things when it's hard enough to master one thing in today's NBA?
That is really difficult. I think you see switching like a change of personality a little more on offense, and it almost, or isn't it tending to be more tempo? Like, we bring in this speed guy. Chris Paul's been running our offense at a grinding pace, and we bring in Cameron Payne, and he's going to run you into the ground with some athletes. Like, I think you get that on offense, but defensively, I think that's a much tougher switch, right? Like, that is a much tougher to go from switching everything to drop. You could do it a little, and look, it's the NBA. You better throw a bunch of looks at teams, right? Like, you better make things, especially for the best teams, a little confusing, but it's hard to make that switch. I think the best, when they're healthy, the best drop is still the Bucks because Brook Lopez gets in the paint.
Yes. But
what they bring, unlike some of the, of these other drop teams, they're just long. They're just so long and disruptive that they can get away with it. The problem the Jazz always had is that it was Rudy Gobert in the paint, and frankly, Royce O'Neal was solid, and then 3 other traffic cones.
Yes.
And Rudy Gobert was put in an impossible. The Clippers, they to a man would say it wasn't Gobert. We put him in an impossible situation and said, you got to cover the guy in the corner and the paint because nobody can stay in front of our guys. And you've got to have that length. If you're going to be dropped, you still have to be aggressive. That part would stay. I think you can get to a spot where it's decent, but ultimately I'm with you. I think defensively you're one or the other. You have to be a certain type of team. I think it's
tough. And that's why I just think Eric Spoelstra is going to lean against this 2 bigs and lean against Omar Yurtseven because he has something special. With Dwayne Dedmon, he's more of a veteran and it's more limited doses. Chase asked a question here on the YouTube chat on the Big O Show. You can go to our chat board and smash those like buttons. And Bam is a leading man. Last night we saw, this was with Jimmy Butler out. So again, it's a different situation. Bam takes 17 shots. Good for him. He only takes 1 3-pointer, so he's not necessarily staying too far out. Does Bam Adebayo need to be more of a leading offensive man? And if Bam is taking all those shots, does it take the ball out of the hands of other players who simply are better offensive players?
A little. Don't you need Bam to be the guy who gets his 20 He can create some, but a lot of it's going to be opportunistic off of Jimmy drawing attention and getting a mismatch for Bam or Kyle if things are going well, right? That he's not necessarily the one. There'll be a little of this, but the goal, I don't think the point of the offense is to throw him the ball 18 feet out, have him face up every time down, right? Like he's going to get his offense in other ways. Last night he got the ball in his hands more just because of, welcome to the preseason, right? The lineups, but I don't know that that's how he's normally going to get his offense. I think this was is it just me? Is it he's more that guy than he can create a little, but he's not going to do that every time down.
I just don't think he has that in his repertoire. I don't think, not to be crude, but he's that skilled enough post-wise to do it. I also think there's always been an issue of this when you go big. Bam Adebayo takes advantage of his quickness advantage against other big men, other centers. I think when he's cast at power forward, you get more of those defensive power forward types, almost like the Caleb Martin types that the Heat feature, and they can contend with Bam's quickness. And all of a sudden, that spin move that he has, it's not that it's a slow-footed big man against him, but it's a quicker power forward, and I think he loses that, and then he winds up settling more for the mid-range jumper, and to me, that's a settle shot. That's on the opponent's scouting board. Let them have that. We're fine with that. If he's not going to have the hard roll, we'd rather him shoot the pull-up jumper, so I think that's an issue also. So I think last night was sort of, Eric Spoelstra had a really good point. He said the reason we play Bam and Yurt is because it's something we have to look at now when the games don't count, because it's a harder way to play. It's a more unique way to play. So we have to put the minutes out there. We'll get to what we need to. We have 14 returning players. We know who we are. Matter of fact, I would forecast, I think you'd agree. Right now, if you had to say who's the Heat's opening night power forward, I would go with Caleb Martin with Bam at center. I think you'd agree, Kurt?
Yeah, I would think so.
Yeah, I just think that right now when you're looking at it, and then they're going to experiment with other things, maybe even a little about what you referenced in our second segment today with Duncan Robinson, showcase a little. Hey, maybe Omar Yurtseven can become a sweetener. Maybe he puts up that statistical run like he did last year at midseason when he played 7 weeks as the leading man with Bam Adebayo out with that thumb injury, and he was able to put up numbers, so I think that's possible also. Last night's other takeaway was an aggressive Tyler Hero. We spoke about the extension. We spoke about the money. Again, that does not kick in until the 23-24 season. So it's still rookie scale, high value Tyler Hero right now. Tyler Hero is offensive force. Would you almost feature him? And here's the question I have. In the starting lineup, when Tyler Hero plays with Jimmy Butler, Bam Adebayo, and Kyle Lowry, he's not as featured as he is in the second unit. So, Kurt, we spoke about in our value assessment of Tyler's contract, can he be a starter? We both agreed he could. Anyone can be a starter. The coach decides. But is this the best use of Tyler Hero? More off the ball, not ball dominant. Kyle Lowry's going to be ball dominant. Jimmy Butler's ball dominant. We just spoke about maybe Bam Adebayo being more ball dominant. So are the Heat almost more feeding Tyler's ego of being a starter than in this alignment using Tyler's best skill set while surrounding him with 3 other scorers?
I still think the fact that he shoots 40% from 3 helps slashing Jimmy Butler and slashing Kyle Lowry, and that you can't leave Tyler, right? But Ira, does this become one of those situations where Tyler Hero wants to start, so we're going to start him. He's going to play 4 to 5 minutes, come out, and then go back in with the second unit?
And you know what? And I'm going to give you the opposite of that. I think what's going to happen, and we saw this a little last night, Tyler was really good at point guard when he started the second half.
Yes.
Kyle Lowry set out the second half. I think what they do is this. I think Kyle Lowry and Tyler Hero, Jimmy Butler, Caleb Martin, and Bam Adebayo start. I think Kyle Lowry comes out after 4 minutes. Older guy, gets his rest, and they shift Tyler to point guard. Yes, they do have Gabe Vincent in reserve. They have some younger players also. But I think that's a way to manipulate the lineups. So then you have Tyler Hero playing the first 8 minutes of the game. Kyle Lowry then comes back after a rest, and you stagger those two. Again, Kurt and I, we've been doing this for decades. Starting lineup is just an ego thing. You get to your rotation. You get to your closing lineup. That's the bigger question I have for you, Kurt Helin, with Tyler Hero. Can Tyler Hero, and we've seen this on our chat board, and thanks everyone for chiming in here also, Can he be a closer with his defense? That's where the Heat gets into trouble in the playoffs. A lot of people are saying, hey, the Heat's closing lineup will be Tyler and Kyle and Jimmy and maybe a shooter in Max Strus, maybe Victor Oladipo and Bam Adebayo. But is Tyler Hero's defense up to that moment when everyone is going to run pick and roll? When Boston is going to pick and roll with Marcus Smart, maybe they try to hide Tyler and him and all of a sudden he's on Jaylen Brown. I think that's still what needs to be addressed, the closing lineup more than the starting lineup.
And that's what he's got to prove this year, isn't it? Is it like if you're going to live up to the contract, those are the moments that matter more than just scoring 20 points a game. I think you're right, by the way. If you get close game late with Boston, they're going to run Jaylen Brown, Jason Tatum pick and roll probably off of each other, try to get the matchup they want. And I think they'd go – when I look at that lineup, I'd be like, I'm going to go at Tyler Hero. And he's got to prove he can – at least be a solid team defender, at least be solid enough that the help rotations are there and they can make this work. That's where he's got to earn the money.
And I agree with that. So I think I want to see the end game. And again, the ends of exhibition games don't matter. But I wonder if we get closer to the end of the preseason in one of the Heat's games, maybe coming up next week, we see a little bit more of a hint of how they're going to close. Another question I want to get to here is, and I don't mean this condescendingly, so don't take it the wrong way, NBA coaches lie. I know Kurt stands out there at Staples and Crypto.com, and I remember when Phil Jackson was there, and we'd have these pregame scrums, and Frank Vogel, and the coaches wouldn't tell you anything. You would try to get an answer, who's starting, who's injured. Here's my question, Kurt Helin. Victor Oladipo doesn't play the Heat scrimmage, inter-squad scrimmage on Monday. Only 3 players don't play. Udonis Haslem, because he never plays. Gabe Vincent has legitimate knee soreness. He was rested a bit during camp. And Eric Spoelstra says, nah, I don't want to play Vic in scrimmages. I want to get him ready for practices and other games. Okay. Then yesterday, before the game, they tell us Victor Oladipo is not playing the preseason opener also. Again, Eric Spoelstra says we have other games. We're going to take care of that. We want to rest Vic. Reading into those two things, knowing that coaches only tell you so much, knowing that the NBA does not require injury reports during the preseason, do you think all is really copacetic and good to go with Victor Oladipo, or does it open your eyes when we see a player sit out an inter-squad scrimmage when everyone else plays, sit out the preseason opener or your home preseason opener when you tend to play more of your players than you do in road preseason games? Is all of this Victor Oladipo is back? Victor Oladipo had a full camp. Isn't seeing believing, and we haven't seen yet?
Yeah. Coaches do lie. By the way, my favorite this week, I went to Lakers-Kings preseason. Mike Brown wouldn't tell us the starting lineups for a preseason game.
Oh, Eric Spoelstra the same way, yeah.
I'm like, are you kidding? You're protecting your competitive advantage in this?
Yes.
Anyway, what would worry me, preseason games are preseason games. It's the inter-squad scrimmage where everybody played, and he sat out that would really raise a red flag with me. Would really catch an eyebrow where it's like, is there something a little more here? And like you said, they do not have to give an injury report. It could be very little, right? It could be just, hey, he's older. We're kind of winding him. He's had an injury history. We're just being cautious. But that's the red flag. If those inter-squad scrimmages are where you really are cranking it up in the preseason, right? Like
and Kurt, the reason I bring this up is this. When you and I were talking about trading Tyler Hero, which was sort of our sport for the last 6 weeks or so, it kept coming back to the Heat can afford to do that because even if you start Max Strus and Jimmy Butler and Kyle Lowry, you would have Victor Oladipo coming off the bench. So we talked ourselves into, okay, if Tyler is gone, you still have Victor Oladipo. My question now is, and a matter of fact, when I just told you my thoughts on Kyle starts, plays the first 4 minutes, Tyler goes to point guard. Yeah. Is Victor Oladipo as essential right now, knowing Tyler Hero cannot be traded this season? I know injuries can come, but if we go through our Heat hierarchy, let's say we go with a season opening starting lineup for argument's sake of Bam Adebayo, Caleb Martin, Tyler Hero, Jimmy Butler, and Kyle Lowry. So you have those 4 there. You know you're going to get to a shooter in Max Strus or Duncan Robinson because you're going to space the floor. You know you're going to get to one more big man because you have to, whether it's Omer Yurtseven or Dwayne Dedmon anyway. So I'm almost wondering if Victor Oladipo even going to have the chance this season, or with Tyler Hero staying, does he become what he sort of was the last 2 seasons for the Heat? Just an ancillary player anyway?
I think he's going to have to earn more than that. But I think there are absolutely minutes with him next to, because he can work a little off the ball too, next to Tyler in that second unit. But he's going to have to show maybe a little more. He's shown flashes the last couple of years, right? But I don't think it's been consistent. He's going to have to show more consistency. And let's put it this way. They could really use him.
Yes.
But they can survive without him because, look, if they ultimately need it, we haven't, like, Gabe Vincent's there. Like, you can get some solid minutes out of Gabe Vincent. So you're going to be okay if he can't go.
Right.
But you're better if you get, frankly, you're just better if you get him out there and he's himself. And
we've gone through a full hour now, which shows you even in the preseason, there's plenty to talk about. Kurt Helin now actually goes back to bed. His pajamas are under his shirt there by his library. 6 a.m. starting every Wednesday. We'll be back next week with another Inside the Paint brought to you by redrecover.com. And as we found, there is plenty to talk about even in the preseason. But now our Tua talk already in progress rolls on, as does the Big O Show.
This is the Big O Show.